Last night, RT made international headlines when one of our anchors went on the record and said Russian intervention in Crimea is wrong. And indeed, as a reporter on this network, I face many ethical and moral challenges, especially me personally, coming from a family whose my grandparents came here as refugees during the Hungarian Revolution, ironically to escape the Soviet forces. I'm proud to be an American and believe in disseminating the truth. And that is why, after this newscast, I'm resigning.
Hey, welcome back to our coverage here of the crisis in Ukraine, coming to you live from Kiev's Independence Square. A dramatic move today by an anchor for the network Russia Today America. Her name is Liz Wahl. She's an American who works in the Russia Today America's Washington bureau. She accused her employer of glossing over the actions of Vladimir Putin in Crimea. And Liz, it's good to have you on the program. Obviously, your announcement stunned a lot of people. Why did you decide to resign during your newscast? Because you've been working there for like 2.5 years. Clearly, you're familiar with the perspective of RT America, the kind of stuff, the kind of stories they put on the air. So why today?
Why today? That's a good question. I think the coverage, as we're in this diplomatic standoff and during the escalation of this crisis in Crimea, I think the propagandist nature of RT came out in full force. Today, for example, I had an interview with Ron Paul. The only question that I asked, I asked many questions. I asked about the Russian intervention. You know, he has a very anti-intervention approach. I asked him in the wake of escalation by the Russian military, how long, how should we respond to this? How should the U.S. respond to this? And that question was cut out of the interview. There was another segment. And what's clear is what's happening right now amid this crisis is that RT is not about the truth. It's about promoting a Putinist agenda. And I can tell you firsthand, it's also about bashing America. And
in the spotlight tonight, another stunning moment on Russian television. Last night, we showed you Abby Martin voicing her opposition to the Russian invasion of Ukraine on her show on an English-speaking network that is funded by the Kremlin. Joining me now is the now former RT America correspondent and news anchor Liz Wahl. Liz, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I know this has been a crazy day for you. And Liz, Abby says that she sees absolutely no difference between this Kremlin-owned and supported network and the network that I'm on because it's corporate-owned. Every other network is corporate-owned. She sees no difference between a government-funded network and private-funded network, the kind we have here in the United States.
There's a difference, and that's something that's touted on RT. It's funded by the Russian government, as you just mentioned, and there is a difference. And I think there's a critique to be made about the media. You can have this conversation about objectivity, but it's different when you're promoting the foreign policy of a dictator, of a dictatorial government right now that is coming out and telling outright lies about what indeed is happening over there in Crimea. I did an interview today with Ron Paul, and interestingly, the part where I asked him about Russian intervention, that couldn't even be, that didn't even make air. Those words coming out of my mouth, that Russia intervened, that didn't make air. After that, well, Piers, that's the first time I saw their reaction. I was wondering what their reaction would be, and actually had some hesitations. I feared what measures they would take against me, what retaliatory measures they would take against me. But at the end of the day, Piers, like I said earlier on Anderson's show, I believe in the truth, trying to seek the truth and disseminating the truth.
Just a few hours earlier that was. Now, I suppose my reaction would be what some people have been reacting to what you did, which is if you feel this strongly, and you cited your family history and so on, why would you join RT America to start with, given that it has got a history of being pretty favourable towards Putin? You know, it's got a lot of government support that it's enjoyed over the years. Obviously, Putin's behaviour now is not dissimilar to the Russian activities in Georgia and other places over the last few decades. Why, if you feel so strongly about what they're doing right now, would you want to work for that organisation in the first place?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think I didn't know exactly the extent of the propaganda that is this machine. I thought, you know, that the Cold War was over, and maybe I didn't realize that there would be this much of an infringement on the editorial, on as much pressure. I guess I wasn't expecting that. I tried to make the most of the situation. I'm not.
Liz, welcome. Already, the critics are coming out saying this was a publicity stunt. What do you say?
They're coming out as a publicity stunt. I mean, if telling the truth is a publicity stunt, then whatever it is, call it what you want. This has been something, especially amid the crisis in Crimea, this network has been used in an unprecedented way as a propaganda machine to deliver the foreign policy views of Vladimir Putin. And I think eventually you have to draw a red line in your career, or in many things. And the red line for me came on Wednesday when I was anchoring, and censorship was unlike I've ever seen it before. I interviewed former Congressman Ron Paul. I used the word Russian military intervention. And just uttering those words were cut in the newscast. I couldn't use the word military intervention.
How long, Liz, have you been at RT?
I've been there, Neil, 2.5 years.
All right. So in all the time you were there, you knew it was Russian TV, right? I mean,
yes. In all the time it was there, I mean, I came on board. I saw it as an opportunity. I mean, I understood the geopolitical stance of Putin. I didn't realize, I guess I wasn't aware of how much of his views would actually be pushed in the newscast.
Was this the first time you'd seen it, though? Because there have been a number of instances, certainly in the last 2.5 years, that would certainly remind me that he involves himself.
I knew that this was the truth, and I knew that I had to do it on air because our viewers, and it's interesting because RT does have a following. It tends to be a kind of fringe following, and people actually believe what's being said on air here. And right now, as we're approaching a possible Cold War, as the world is escalating possibly to that point, we have this war of words. This is part of this war of words. This is part of his strategy. And I think our viewers and the world needs to know exactly what this network is about. So that was not.
Well, what do you do? What do you do now? People don't know that you used to be an intern here at Fox News. I think you work with Sean Hannity. What do you do now?
What do I do? Well, it's all happening very, very quickly. I'm taking it one day at a time.
Have you had any job offers?
It's all been happening really, really quickly.
Have you had any job offers? Who has called you up?
I don't know. To be honest, I wasn't expecting the firestorm of controversy.
I know that, but
and
if people called you up, if people said, "Hey, you know, we admire what you did. We want to talk to you."
I don't know.
Is there any place you wouldn't go outside of RT? Is there a place you would not go?
I would not go to North Korea.
Okay. Would you go to MSNBC?
Maybe.
Would you go to CNN?
Yes.
Would you go to Fox?
Oh my gosh. Well, we'll see what offers stand.
Would you go to Fox Business? If you don't have it, you should demand it.
I should demand it. I am demanding this.
Okay.
Now, on air, on TV.
We'll watch closely.
It's all a promotional stunt anyways, isn't it?
That's what they're saying, but you say no. Okay. Liz, thank you very, very much. We'll have more right after this.
Well, just before we came on air, I spoke to Liz Wahl.
With the crisis in Crimea, the propaganda The propaganda coming from this network has reached unprecedented levels. It's become increasingly clear that they're trying to control the message in a way that aligns with Vladimir Putin's Russian, his foreign policy objectives, with questions being outright censored. I had an interview with a former Congressman, Ron Paul, yesterday. I used the word Russian invasion, and they cut those words out.
The idea of a neutral media, if you look at your own country, look at Fox News, for example, it clearly has a very particular agenda. Many other stations the same. I mean, are you being naive here? Were you naive when you went to Russia today?
No, I mean, I think when I went into Russia today, when I saw it as an opportunity, and I was hoping to make the most of it, I think.
Welcome back to Reliable Sources. So listen to this. Right now, Vladimir Putin's government may be pumping propaganda into the homes of millions of Americans who have no idea they're watching Putin TV. I'm talking about Russia Today, or RT. It's a cable channel that is available in a lot of homes, including mine in New York and many here in Washington. We're not exactly sure how many. I tried to figure out this week how many homes it's in, and there is no reliable number. But RT claims it reaches 85 million people here in the United States. It's owned and operated by the Russian government. But here in the U.S., a lot of its reporters and anchors are Americans. And this week, there was a lot of new evidence that RT is something other than just an ordinary cable news channel. As the crisis between the United States and Russia grew ever more tense, the tone of RT was clearly pro-Russian and at times anti-American. And as people began to notice, well, all hell broke loose at RT. On Tuesday, anchor Abby Martin decided to break ranks. That went viral right away. And one day after that statement, Washington correspondent Liz Wahl simply walked out of the job.
I had an interview with Congressman Ron Paul, and the news director wrote very specific questions. I have them here. They're very loaded questions. I could read them, but I'd have to go through my email right now. I didn't go by them because they were absolutely ludicrous, but I did ask some of my own questions. One of the questions that I asked used the words Russian military intervention, and when it was played, they cut out that line because, as we know, the Kremlin doesn't want us to see it as a military intervention. They want to see their involvement in Ukraine
so
as a humanitarian crisis.
Of censorship on the part of the management.
Absolutely. Russian intervention, you know, the part where I asked him about Russian intervention, I used the word Russian invasion, and I used the word Russian military intervention. The words Russian military intervention. Well, perhaps two of the most talked about speeches from the United Nations General Assembly are from the leaders of two dueling nations. That's Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Of course, Netanyahu had that unforgettable cartoon bomb with a clear red line drawn. His speech was aired in full on multiple mainstream networks. Iran's speech, however, was cut short. And that means viewers didn't get to see this. Now, omissions like that make all the difference in how the Iranian leader is portrayed. It means the difference between a warmonger and someone opposed to war. So what else isn't being reported, and what are the ramifications of this kind of selective reporting? To discuss this, I was joined by Amber Lyon, three-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, photographer, and filmmaker.
Well, I really worry here that the United States public is being led into another potential conflict with Iran, the similar way that we were led into the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, because you're starting to see the mainstream media really overhype the situation in Iran and omit important facts like what you just showed, Liz, where Ahmadinejad was saying that there are options for peace. But if you go back and you look at the way that CNN and other mainstream outlets covered that, they ignored that part of the speech.
So we're going to hang out with these protesters for a little bit.
This is what the protests look like today. Young boys who've been hit with tear gas.
Now, the documentary that we just saw a clip of never aired. It never aired on CNN International. Why not?
And after some investigation, we found out that CNN International is actually making money from the Bahrain regime. They are a customer of Bahrain. Bahrain is paying CNN International to create content that shows Bahrain in a favorable light.
Wow, Amber, really, really eye-opening, and really appreciate you coming on the show and telling us all about this. That was Amber Lyon, 3-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, photographer, and filmmaker.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.